Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to Hanging with the Elderlies. I am Felicia Phillips, and as most of you know, I am a caregiver for both of my parents, my mother, who is 70 years old with a host of chronic conditions, and my father, who is 72 years old, who suffers from Parkinson's disease. And today, I have a very special part of Team Phillips with me, and that is my 21-year-old daughter, Kyra. And Kyra is going to share with us today caregiving from a different perspective. Oftentimes, on my Facebook page at Hanging with the Elderlies and Instagram, you see a lot of the things that I do day to day as a caregiver, and you get to hear a lot of where my heart is as a caregiver. But what is often missing from that dialogue or from that conversation, particularly when you are someone like me, someone that's a part of the sandwich generation, is the view from the young people. But let me back up. What is the sandwich generation? Well, the sandwich generation is that generation that still has children at home, young people at home, be it toddlers, teenagers, etc., who they are caring for and raising, and then at the same time also providing some form of care for another loved one or a parent. In my case, I have my daughter Kyra, who's 21, and I have a 16-year-old daughter, and then I have both of my parents, and I am the one that's in between that sandwich. Really raising my girls, and obviously Kyra's 21, so she's transitioning to adulthood, but this didn't just start this year. So raising my girls while at the same time providing care to my parents. And so this is a really important conversation, and it's probably going to take a lot more than just one video. So we're going to break this down into segments. But what I wanted to talk about specifically today with my daughter, and I'm going to give her a chance just to say hello to you guys, is not currently what's going on and how she's dealing with caregiving, but in my conversations with her over the years, I realized that my parents and their health was impacting her long before my husband and I actually became caregivers. And I had not considered it during those formative years, when my daughter was in high school and when she was in middle school, of what impact my parents and they're going in and out of the hospital and all of that had on my children. And it wasn't until we became caregivers and I began talking to my children, particularly Kyra, that I really had to go back and think through the years and how she's responding now and what that is based on. And so I hope that you will share this with other caregivers, particularly those who are in the sandwich generation. Ultimately, my message is that as a caregiver, you want to make sure that you're taking care of yourself, and you want to make sure that you're taking care of your family, and that it's really important for those of us who are in the sandwich generation that we also pay attention to what's going on with our children and how this whole thing is impacting them, because it absolutely has an impact. So I'm going to pause for a moment and just say hi to Kyra. We may be boring her. We'll see. Hey, Kai. This is my Kai. Kai, say hi to everybody.
Hello.
So it appears she's not one of many words, but once we get started with me asking her a couple of questions, I think that you'll be really enlightened by the things that she has to say. So, as I gave the whole introduction to everybody, in talking to you more recently, I just realized that this caregiving thing didn't just start within the past 3 years that Daddy and I have been caring for my mom and Pop, but there were things that were happening along the way. And so I want to first start off by asking you, really, at what point do you remember a particular time or an age where you realized that your grandparents were sick?
I think with my mom, it was some sort of like stroke or something, which is, it's interesting thinking back now, like how kids do like receive certain stuff, like with I'll say like with pop and Parkinson's and stuff like that, because of our specific situation and our interaction with that. Like I didn't even know that it was something that like progressively got worse,
Right.
and eventually just like deteriorated a person, because I remember being back at like my mom's house and we'd be like praying or something in the living room, and I didn't want to hold Pop Pop's hand because his hand would shake, and I found that like annoying.
Right.
But I didn't think that, like, I thought that's what it was. I thought it was just some condition that made your hand shake, and
Right.
that's it. As far as my mom, I know like strokes and stuff like that, I just thought, I mean, it was scary at the time, but I'd never like experienced it. Like, I was never there with her when it happened. But also with our unique experience, it was always kind of, it would happen and it'd be a big thing, but then she would bounce back from it. So I didn't think that strokes were something that could like kill you either. Like, all of the stuff, I mean, it's about, really knowing what each condition can bring, but it's also about everyone's particular like journey with it, because kids are only going to know what they see and what they experience firsthand.
Right. And interestingly enough, with Parkinson's disease, you're not the only person that thought that the Parkinson's was limited to just his handshaking.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I certainly knew that it was a neurodegenerative disease and that things would get worse. But to be very honest, right now, my mom and Pop Pop don't really understand Parkinson's.
Mm-hmm.
If you were to ask Pop Pop what his concerns are, he talks about losing weight. He's really small, he's really thin. And he talks about his handshaking, but he doesn't understand some of the other symptoms that, after me doing research as an adult, that I know and can recognize, oh, wow, that's his Parkinson's. Oh, this is his Parkinson's. And so if I'm saying that I didn't know, until more recently, which is honestly within the past 3 years when I assumed care of them, when I began to do more research. I knew it was, again, neurodegenerative, but I didn't know exactly what to expect with it. And so if I didn't, as an adult, we're talking, my father has had Parkinson's now for about 10 years. So we're talking about my daughter at 11 and 12, as young as 11 and 12, just knowing that Pop Pop had something that caused his hand to shake, but not really understanding what that means. And the same thing with my mother. Now, for those that don't follow us, just so we're clear on what conditions we're talking about, with my father, he has Parkinson's. And beyond that, he is absolutely healthy. My mother, on the other hand, has a host of chronic conditions. And interestingly enough, it all seemed to start back in 2009. She actually had a seizure at a movie theater. She was out at the movies with my sister and I think my nieces, or my niece and my nephew. And my mother passed out. She had a seizure. And she was rushed to the hospital. And when she got to the hospital, her blood sugar was like 1155, 1250, somewhere around there. And she was diagnosed with diabetes. At the same time, they also found that she had an aneurysm. And so there was a need to decide whether we were going to treat the aneurysm or not, and, kind of wait and see where that went. And from the diabetes diagnosis, so many other things came into play, which honestly, for me, again, when you listen to what my daughter said, I knew that they had these conditions, but I just didn't know the depth of it or the breadth of it. I didn't either. In 2017, when I first assumed care of my parents and I took my mother to the doctor and they started rattling off all these other conditions, I left so many doctor's appointments in tears because I had no idea that my mother was dealing with so much. I knew she had type 2 diabetes and that was it. And so to spend 2017 and 2018 learning that she has type 2 diabetes, she has hypertension, she has sleep apnea, she has epilepsy, right? You heard us talk about seizures. She has stage 3 kidney disease. It was just incredible. And the newer diagnosis is vascular dementia, which obviously is just heartbreaking. And so I have some experience with dementia because my grandmother had Alzheimer's and she died at 91 and my mother was her caregiver. So I have some experience with that, which is actually why it's devastating. But these other conditions, we didn't know that she was suffering from them. And it has just gotten progressively worse throughout the years. So tell me then, how specifically has it impacted you as far as family time, special occasions, holidays? Were there times when you expected your grandparents to be around, but they weren't because of a sickness or an illness or a hospitalization?
Um, I think like in the mindset of like a child and stuff like this, like when you don't know, again, like when you don't know what it is, you just know what, like how the person has been acting, and then you see the differences. And so the first reaction that I had was probably like irritation, like I said, I wasn't there for any of the seizure or like stroke things happening, but I feel like I would have been like, "What are you doing? Get up!" I didn't understand why Pop Up's hand was shaking and why he couldn't just stop,
Stop
because
it.
it was the first introduction to some sort of condition that caused you to lose control of your body like that. Um, I think that you did a pretty good job in like childhood of not um of like balancing, like you're our mom first, before you can really be a caregiver. But also it was not ever really like, I don't know, I didn't grasp the concept of like the real danger. It was more like a, my mom's in the hospital again, eye roll, she wasn't taking her medicine, and this is happening, and I just don't understand why she can't do it. But also, it's, I think from a child's perspective, you don't understand um how important, like we were talking about how important or how impactful habits are and stuff like that. So even the simple diagnosis of the type 2 diabetes, if you're eating a particular way or eating whatever you want and doing whatever you want and having the habits that you have, you don't know, especially as you get into like middle age and older, how to stray away from that, especially when
Right.
those habits are formed due to stress, like stress eating, or different kind of like emotional or mental aspects.
Right. You said something that I clearly remember being an issue for you when you were younger, and that was particularly with the type 2 diabetes. And I can say that I think for all of us, the disease that we knew the most about was the type 2 diabetes. So we just knew that we had to watch her blood sugar, and there were certain things that she needed not to eat as much and things like that. But I specifically remember when we were back in Pennsylvania, that you would get frustrated and you would get angry and you wouldn't understand when my mom would come over and she would grab, I'm making something up, but grab a donut or grab a slice of cake or grab something that we clearly knew was going to be detrimental to her health. And we would, say, "Mom, you can't eat that. Stop, don't eat that." And she would go back and forth. And I remember you just being so angry and so, just not comprehending. I would try to, explain at that time, well, like you said, it's a bad habit. She's used to eating all of these things and now she has to change. And I just remember you being upset and it just being so difficult for you to get why, if this is going to kill you, then why are you putting it in your mouth? If this is not good for you and you know that you now have diabetes, then why are we arguing with you? Why do we have to argue with you to help you to stop? Do you remember those times?
Yeah, and again, it's a maturity thing too, especially as I'll say like a preteen, like growing into um, adolescence and becoming more of like a critical thinker. The logic is, if this is what could possibly kill you, then why on earth would you do it? I'll say like in terms of like growing up and stuff like that, I can understand more now, because I do think a lot of people, especially where we are now, would rather just die from whatever than change their eating habits,
Wow.
and stuff like that. Like people make jokes about it all the time. They're like, like if I can't have this, like what's the point of living? I'd rather be happy and dead than
We're all gonna die of
healthy.
something.
And yeah,
Right.
exactly. So also it was just the dramatics of everything. We had a very interesting family dynamic already. So as you know, like even now, I hate things that just feel like they're an ongoing cycle and like the same thing every
Every
day. And
day.
so it's every time my mom's comes over, it's the same argument about what she can and can't eat, and everyone's screaming, and all the kids are crying, and it always is some sort of like blow up when it's like you could just cut all of this out. And it was I thought that which I think was like selfish of me, as but even as like a child, but I thought it was selfish too. So it's like, not only do you know that you're not supposed to have this, but if something happens to you, you should know that it's going to impact all of us. So why aren't you thinking not only of yourself with this cake, but of how the rest of our lives are going to be if you die within the next couple of years?
Right. So did you actually have any fears when you were younger? And all of this, when we're talking now, I'm talking about before you went away to school. We'll probably talk about when you went away in the next like segment or video. But from, you know, the time that my mom was diagnosed to, let's say 2016ish, when you graduated from high school, did you ever have any fear that she would actually die?
I don't think so, but it's also because in my childhood in general, you know, like no one had ever died around, no one in like close proximity had ever died.
Right.
So, even in like the car accident, how old was
I guess you were like
6?
5 or 6. You were 6.
I was like 6, and I was in a car accident, and there was like not even a bit of fear that I was going to die. Like, I know people die from car accidents. I know that people die from complications due to all of these chronic conditions. But because no one had ever been close enough, like I had never seen that, it was just never in my mind. I knew it was, I thought of all of, like, I thought of it as just a nuisance and annoyance.
Okay. Cool. This is good. We have, it looks like we have a couple more minutes to talk on this topic. And then when we do part 2, we're going to talk about the impact while you were off in school, and then at the point that we actually, mommy and daddy actually became caregivers. But thank you for making me feel better as far as the balance. You said that you think I did a good job balancing. I will say, for those of you who are in the sandwich generation who are trying to balance that, while I appreciate her saying that I did a good job balancing, what we were doing during the time frame that she's talking about is just so different from where we are right now. That time frame was my mother and my father were still living independently. They were still handling all of their business independently. My father was still driving and getting himself around. They lived in their own home.
Yeah, they didn't need as much.
They didn't need as much at all. And so it was probably a lot easier for me to help out. And honestly, you know, my mother was still working, and she was still, again, independent when she first got diagnosed. And she did end up having the aneurysm. We did a procedure in which they inserted coils into the aneurysm to fill it so that it wouldn't burst. So she had the aneurysm treated, and was, again, independent probably, I think at least for another 2 years or so. I don't remember exactly when she stopped working. She sort of worked for fun, so she did taxes at H&R Block. It wasn't anything that was really paying her bills, but she liked numbers and she liked taxes. And I know that she did slow down and eventually stop after she had the aneurysm treated. So maybe within a year or so of that, around 2010, because I think she felt less comfortable with her memory, and it just was no longer something that was engaging for her. So yeah, so that's kind of where we've been. What about my mom missing your high school graduation?
Hate to sound ridiculous, I did not recall in the slightest.
She was in a hospital. See, some things that you think as a parent are really impactful and they're not, and then things that aren't even on your radar are impactful. So I guess I was the one that was upset because my mother was hospitalized and was not able to go to my daughter's high school graduation.
In that defense, that meant nothing to me. That whole day I kind of like blocked from my mind as much of high school.
That's a whole different issue and a whole different video and a whole different brand. But I'm trying to think if she missed any other.
But that's the thing too, as far as the relationship, um, it depends on where everybody is. I have always been very like, first of all, a lot of the stuff that I did, I was very nonchalant about anyway. But also, I didn't like need my mom there. Um, and so like I feel like if it's that like expectancy and everything, then of course I would have been disappointed. And if I ask a bunch of other people like if their grandma didn't get to make their graduation, how they feel, they'd probably be upset and stuff like that. But depending on the relationship, that was just never a concern of mine. So even in all the other like things, like the things that my mom came to, is because she wanted to come, not because I like needed her there, because people have their lives.
Okay.
So
Fair enough, fair enough. Now, in thinking of some of the conditions that my mom has, and guys, we're talking about my mother so much because her condition, she has the most stuff going on. And actually, when we get to the caregiving segment, specific on caregiving and now, we're probably going to talk a lot more about my father, because one thing that Kyra and I both agree on, don't tell him if he's watching, is that we thought the caregiver for my mother was going to be more difficult, and we thought that my father was going to be easy breezy. And we have only been in the same home since August, but my father is the real pain.
I think that's also just I feel like that could be another something. It's just like the difference also between caregiving for women and caregiving for men, especially like black men. There's so much pride and other sort of like just generational stuff, like gender roles and just like traditional things that we have to deal with now because he is a man, with like my grandma, that we don't have to worry about.
Right. And then I just want to back up to one thing, and then we're going to end this. You know, Yo-Yo always likes to hop in the video, so she needs some attention right now. Everybody say hi, Yo-Yo. Say hi, Yo-Yo. So caregiving and dogs. My father hates Yo-Yo, but he can't stand her. But my mother loves Yo-Yo. So again, different topic. But yes, Yo-Yo is mommy's baby. Last thing that I want to ask you for this, and then we will take a break, is do you think that some of your nonchalance regarding my mom and papa and their health when you were younger, 11 and 12, maybe it was because you didn't know, but 16, 17, and 18, do you think that it became a defense mechanism for you because, you know, you were just kind of, like you said, you didn't expect this to go on and realize that some of the same things are happening over and over again? So how many times you're going to get upset that my mom went to the hospital, or how many times you're going to answer the phone and have me say, hey, you know, we have to go to the hospital with my mom?
I didn't think about that. I feel like it definitely could. I know, like, in general, I'm always sort of, like, detached, from, like, certain sort of things. So I feel like, yeah, definitely with my mom and Papa too, I guess, it was more so, yeah, I think, like, at around, like, that time, like preteen, 10, 11, 12, you do have to, well, you don't have to, but I'll say I specifically, I don't want to say prepared myself, but kind of tried to like grasp the reality that like because of this condition and because she's not moving to change, it's very tangible that she could die very soon. And so it was like, I'm not really going to be stressed out. I'm not going to stress myself out, I'll say, every time something happens, because at the end of the day, I felt like it was her choice. So that's what she wanted to do. Like, why am I freak out? Especially because everybody was, you know, you were always so frustrated with it, and Caitlin is always just sad about anything that goes wrong. Mm-hmm. And, you know, Daddy was stressed out because you were stressed out. So I'm like, okay, well, all of this stress around me, like, I'm not going to add to it. So I kind of just was like, okay, so this is what could happen. This is also what could happen. Either way, that's life. Moving on.
Got it. Final thoughts. If you had to talk to, want two responses, if you had to talk to a young person right now that's dealing with grandparents or parents or someone who is sick and
Mm-hmm.
it's ongoing, what advice would you give to them? And then the second question is, what advice would you give to the parents who are in the sandwich generation to ensure that their children, don't feel undue pressure or premature pressure for their age in dealing with sick parents? And I'll give an example. For me, my grandfather died of cancer when I was in the 10th grade, and I kind of didn't get it either. And it was cancer, like everybody knows you die from cancer, but I didn't get it. And I remember personally being very resentful that my mother was spending so much time with my grandfather and wanting her to come home. I remember literally the day that my grandfather died, the night before, I had gone on my 10th grade dance, my soft hop, and my mother was at my grandfather's house. It was his birthday, and they celebrated his birthday. Didn't know that was going to be his last birthday. Well, actually, they knew. They knew it was going to be his last birthday, but I didn't. And I remember being upset because my mother didn't come home that night and me wanting her to come home. And why do you have to stay here? And then the next morning, before my father and I got to my grandmother's house, we got the call that my grandfather had passed away. And then I felt bad, like, oh man, like I was, being so difficult with my mom, and she needed to be there. At the same time, they all knew they had been given some days, a length of days that he was going to die.
Us black families
And
not
I
talking.
didn't know that. So I feel like even at 15, if you had told me grandpa only has 30 days to live or he only has 10 days to live or whatever, I think I would have been a little bit more open. Even though he was laid out in the bed and, everything looked really bad, it's still kind of like he's not dead. So why do you have to be over here so much? Mm-hmm. So I know I shared a lot. Again, two things. One, to young people, and then to the parents in the sandwich generation.
So, I think the biggest things for both are going to be education and communication. One thing that I wish that I had done was educate myself on like what these conditions were going to bring, because I know oftentimes you have to, like, sometimes you do have to point out to me what is my grandparents being my grandparents, which is something,
right,
and then what is like the specific condition that they have,
right.
So I feel like that's a big thing, because a lot of misunderstanding just in everything in general is a lack of education. If I don't understand why you're doing this, then my reaction is going to be irritated or angry.
But sharing that with you at 10 or 11 is very different from 16, 17.
Yeah, and it's an ongoing thing as the caregiving goes on, that people like medicine, it develops and stuff like that. So my advice for younger people is really just to try to understand more, and just try to be able to distinguish like what is their condition, like especially if they like lash out on you or something, like understanding what is their condition and what is them. I will say though, specifically like with my grandmother, yeah, like a lot of times like I can see like with the habits and stuff like that, what is her condition, and then other stuff I know is just her personality, and I'm like, okay, so regardless of this, that's not how you're going to talk to me, so we're gonna cut
absolutely
that.
Absolutely.
And then for sandwich generation, I would say again, like communication. I think to sit your kids down and be like, okay, so this is what's up and this is what they need and everything, but absolutely first, you said you have to take care of yourself, you have to take care, like I really think it should be taking care of yourself, like mentally and health wise, of course, and then taking care of your kids, and then whoever else has to be dealt with. So once you know that you're in a good space, it's really having that conversation with your children and being like, this is what they need, but what do you need from me before I take care of them? And just like honest communication, being like, oh, like, do you think that, like, am I away too much? Are you, like, if you miss my concert or something like that, it's like, okay, well, how can I make that up to you? Making sure that in taking care of your parents or whoever you have to take care of, you're not neglecting your children who, like, should come first, because of course that's going to result in resentment toward, because you know, no matter how old you are, it's going to cause like resentment toward you, but also resentment toward whoever
The
else.
person, right?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome stuff. Well, guys, I hope that this was enlightening for you. I know I actually learned even more in this conversation about caregiving and my role as a mother and a caregiver. And I hope that you did too. I hope that our lessons learned will help you as you either begin your journey or continue your journey. But I also hope that for those of you who are not caregivers yet, that this video in particular will help you to begin to think about things, because as I said, we've been caregivers now, full-time caregivers, for about 3 years, but my parents have been dealing with these diseases, these sicknesses, conditions, and hospitalizations for 11 years. And so this didn't just happen overnight. And so I hope that some of the things that Kyra shared and that I shared with you today will help you and motivate you to begin thinking and looking into the future and figuring out, you know, how can I deal with and help my parents or my loved one or whomever right now? And then what plans do we need to put into place later on as this whole thing progresses? So this is probably the first of what's going to be a series of videos with Kyra. The next video we're going to be moving on from, we talked about when my parents first got diagnosed about 10 years ago until my daughter left home. And in our next segment, we're really going to talk about the transition for our household, in that my daughter left for college, and while she was away, a whole lot of things changed as my husband and I took on more responsibility for my parents. And so we're going to talk about what that looked like and how that experience differed from her earlier experiences and more. So if you are not subscribed to Hanging with the Elderlies, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you know anyone who's a caregiver or anyone who is dealing with with sick parents, with sick loved ones, please share this resource with them. Also, like our Facebook page at Hanging with the Elderlies, and follow us on Instagram at Hanging with the Elderlies. You can connect with us in all of those spaces. You can comment. I share resources. I share information. I share, obviously, these videos on Facebook and Instagram. We'll sometimes do other additional videos that don't make it up to YouTube, or I'll do a preview of a video before it goes to YouTube. So you want to connect with us in all of these spaces. Please let us know if this is helpful to you, if there's a particular topic that you'd like to hear from us. And if you have any questions for Kyra or for me, then you can certainly go to Facebook or Instagram. You can direct message us, you can inbox us, you can comment on the post, etc. But we hope that this is helpful, and we'll be back with more a little bit later. Again, I am Felicia Phillips. This is my daughter Kyra, and we are part of the crew with Hanging with the Elderlies. Thank you so much for your time. That was good.